I stumbled upon the photos by accident. Smiling faces, sun-kissed skin dinners on the terrace, all the things we used to do together, only now without me. In the background was that house my house purchased in my name. They decided I'd be too tired for the trip and wouldn't fit the vibe. They chose a vacation without the extra baggage. I didn't cry, I simply remembered whose name was on the deed and who held the keys. 24 hours later, their vacation ended right on schedule mine. If this story resonated with your soul, click subscribe and let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. I'm truly curious to know where you're tuning in from. My name is Susan Miller. I was 68 years old and retired, though I often joked that I had simply transitioned from spreadsheets to grocery lists. For almost 4 decades, I worked as a senior accountant in a mid-sized firm in Atlanta. I managed payrolls, balanced company budgets, and trained 3 generations of younger, faster hires. Numbers never intimidated me. They were loyal, predictable, and didn't pretend to be something they weren't. People, on the other hand, were far more complicated. After my husband passed away, I stayed in the house we had shared for over 30 years. A 2-story colonial with green shutters and a stubborn oak tree that dropped acorns across the porch like landmines every fall. It was quiet without him. Too quiet, some might say. But I didn't mind the silence. I learned to cook for one. I talked to the photos in the hallway sometimes. I listened to jazz on Sundays. It wasn't the life I imagined for my later years, but it was still mine, and I kept busy. For 15 years, I had a tradition. Every summer, I organized a family vacation to the lake house in North Carolina, a property I had purchased outright after my retirement. Using savings I'd tucked away while everyone else spent theirs on cruises and new cars, the lake house was my dream, and I made it real. It had a wraparound porch, creaky floors, and mismatched furniture I refinished myself. My grandchildren called it Grandma's Camp. We played board games, made pancakes, swam in the cold water, and roasted marshmallows like we were the happiest, simplest family on earth. I paid for everything gas food, even the new swimsuits the kids outgrew every year. I never minded. It was my gift to them, to us, a space where the world slowed down and everyone remembered who we were before careers, deadlines, and city traffic. But that year, something was different. Spring came and went. No calls about planning dates. No texts about who would bring what. No excited can't wait for the lake from my daughter-in-law or calendar reminders from my son. I told myself not to panic. People were busy. Things slipped through the cracks. So, one afternoon in early June, I sent a message to Daniel, my oldest, and simply asked, "Have we thought about dates for the lake house this year?" He responded 3 hours later with a long message that reeked of politeness. "Hey, Mom, actually, we were thinking of doing something a little different this year. The kids are getting older, and we thought it might be nice to take them to the coast. Jenna found a place that's really close to some kid-friendly attractions. We figured it might be more relaxing for you to stay home this time, less hassle with packing and travel. But we'll FaceTime for sure. Love you." I read the message twice, then again. The words stung more each time. Not because they had chosen a beach over a lake, not even because they hadn't invited me, but because they had made the decision without me and dressed it up as kindness, less hassle, relaxing for me as if I were a chore. They needed to work around as if my presence were an inconvenience, not a piece of what made our traditions whole. I didn't respond right away. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I never finished. The sunlight streamed through the window in golden stripes, and everything around me looked the same, but I wasn't. I thought of all the lists I had made over the years, the meal plans, the activity schedules, the emergency contacts. I thought of all the nights I stayed up packing extra socks and batteries for lanterns, and all the mornings I rose first to make pancakes so the smell would greet everyone as they woke up. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. I was simply seeing the truth that I had become a fixture in their lives, reliable, predictable, quietly fading into the background until someone decided I didn't quite fit the picture anymore. But I did fit because I made the picture. I bought the frame. I built the house they were so quick to claim as their summer escape. I didn't know what hurt more, that they had gone on without me, or that they assumed I wouldn't notice. And that year, for the first time, I wasn't packing bags or folding towels into baskets. I was sitting in a kitchen filled with silence and realizing that sometimes the sharpest betrayal doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It comes in the quiet erasure of your place at the table. It comes in the phrase, "We thought it'd be easier." And that was when I began to remember every paper I'd signed, every utility I'd paid, every document that bore my name and no one else's. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to ask for a seat in a car that had already left. But I wasn't going to forget what belonged to me either. And that included the house they were planning to stay in without me. I saw the photos by accident. It was a Wednesday morning, and I was sitting on the back porch with a lukewarm cup of coffee, the kind that doesn't quite taste like comfort, but at least fills your hands with something warm. I had no plans for the day, just a vague sense of waiting for what I didn't know. A call. Maybe a text, something to suggest that my presence still mattered. Instead, I opened my phone and saw it. The first image appeared in a shared album Jenna had once invited me to join, back when the kids were small and everything felt more connected. It was a picture of the lake house, my lake house. The image was bright and cheerful. Daniel stood near the barbecue tongs in one hand, a beer in the other. The kids were in bathing suits, hair wet, cheeks pink from the sun. Jenna sat in one of the Adirondack chairs I had painted by hand, smiling beneath her wide-brimmed sun hat. The caption read, "Our favorite place with our favorite people. Favorite people except for the one who owned the house." My stomach tightened. I scrolled further, more images, more smiles, the porch lights glowing at dusk, a candlelit dinner on the picnic table, the fire pit blazing with marshmallows roasting on long skewers. All the things we had done together year after year. Only now I was not there. They had brought friends too. I didn't recognize them. Another couple, maybe neighbors or coworkers. One of them was holding my granddaughter on his shoulders, laughing as she squealed with delight. Another photo showed Jenna and the woman clinking glasses over a cheese board I recognized. I had bought it at a crafts fair 3 years ago. I kept scrolling, unable to stop myself. Each image was a small betrayal, a celebration I wasn't just left out of. I was erased from it. No mention of me, no trace. Like the house had manifested itself as some magical rental with no history, no ownership, no roots. But I saw the roots. I saw them everywhere. I saw the faded blue cushion I had sewn by hand when the store-bought ones mildewed. I saw the chipped corner of the coffee table that Daniel had bumped into when he was 12. Back when he thought he was too grown up for games, but still climbed into my lap when no one was looking. I saw the birdhouse my husband built still hanging crooked on the oak tree in the yard. They were using my life as a backdrop for their curated version of happiness. I thought about calling, about asking why, about making it clear that I had seen everything. But I didn't. Not yet. I knew my voice would be met with careful justification, the kind that sounds like concern, but lands like insult. "It's just this year. You would have been tired. We didn't want to put pressure on you. But it wasn't about this year. It wasn't about age or convenience. It was about the slow, subtle message that I had outlived my place in their narrative, that I was no longer the center of our shared stories, but a chapter they thought they could skip. The most painful part wasn't the exclusion. It was the joy on their faces, the ease with which they occupied the space I had built, the freedom they felt without me. That was when I realized that this wasn't forgetfulness. It was a decision, a choice to move forward without me, to take what I had offered for years and reframe it as theirs. My effort, my money, my history packaged neatly for their convenience. I closed the album and sat very still. I didn't cry. Instead, I remembered something my husband once told me. He said that people don't always deal with malice. Sometimes they just take without asking, assuming you'll never notice because you've always given freely. But I had noticed, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. I looked out at the garden I had planted, the one blooming now with late roses and lavender. I thought about the keys in my drawer, the deed in my safe, the control I still had if I chose to use it, because they might have left me out of the story. But they were still inside a house with my name on it, and that meant the story wasn't over yet. That evening, I went into the hallway closet, the one where I kept documents too important to throw away, but too personal to leave in a filing cabinet. The folder I was looking for was thick, worn at the edges and sealed with a rubber band that had yellowed with time. I carried it to the dining room table, sat down in the same chair where I used to help the kids with homework, and opened it. There it was, the deed to the lake house signed, notarized, filed my name, written in careful black ink. Susan Ellen Miller, sole owner. I stared at it for a long time, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to feel what I had forgotten. Authority. I had worked for that house. I had walked into the real estate office alone after my retirement party and made an offer in cash. I remembered the weight of the keys in my hand when the agent handed them to me, saying, "It's all yours now," and it was all mine. I had paid every property tax bill on time. I paid for the repairs after the storm that damaged the roof in 2017. I'd paid to have the old plumbing updated and the deck rebuilt. I had even paid to install the smart lock they now use so casually. They never once offered to help. I never asked. I had done it gladly, because back then, I believed I was building something they would protect as much as I had. But that belief had been replaced by something cold and sharp, not bitterness, clarity. They didn't see the house as mine anymore, because I had never insisted on being seen as the owner. I had made it easy. I treated the house as a shared memory, a communal gift instead of the legal and emotional investment it truly was. I had stepped back so they could step in, and now they had rewritten the narrative in their heads. The lake house was the family place, no matter who had bought it, no matter who held the deed. I picked up the paper, ran my finger over the signature. I still remembered the pen I used, the blouse I wore, the smell of the notary's office lemon air freshener and stale printer ink. That version of me had been so sure, so capable, so hopeful. I didn't feel any less capable now, only less trusting. I organized the documents by category: ownership, maintenance, security. I pulled out the most recent invoices from the landscaping company and the cleaning service. I looked up the contact information for the smart lock provider and logged into the control panel. I had kept the credentials written down in a small notebook labeled House Tech, typical of me. Once inside the dashboard, I saw everything: access codes, time logs, security alerts. Daniel had entered the house 2 days ago using the code I had set for him years ago. I still had full control. I could add, change, remove. I could lock and unlock the front door from my phone. I could view a history of every entry and exit. It made me pause. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about teaching them a lesson. This was about reminding myself that I had a right to boundaries, that generosity didn't mean surrender, that being a mother didn't mean disappearing into the background of a vacation slideshow. I opened a new tab and pulled up my will. It still included the lake house as part of the assets to be transferred to Daniel and Claire. I stared at that line. Then I closed the file without saving any changes. I wasn't ready to rewrite everything, not yet, but I was ready to make a statement. I began drafting an email to my lawyer. Nothing dramatic, just a simple inquiry about options for restricting access to private property and outlining terms for guests, even family. I asked about my rights in the event that someone stayed on the premises without permission. I requested templates for notice of revocation of use, practical steps, measured action. It gave me a strange sense of calm typing those sentences. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call them screaming. I didn't post some cryptic status online. Instead, I did what I had always done. I organized the truth, I placed it in neat labeled folders. I took back what was mine, not with rage, but with record keeping, because in the end, the world doesn't revolve around noise. It revolves around signatures. And I had mine exactly where it needed to be. The lock code was still the same. It had been the same for 5 years. My husband's birthday, a number no one else in the family ever remembered. Yet somehow, they all used to get into the house I bought. I changed it without hesitation. I logged into the smart home system from my laptop. The interface was simple, intuitive, designed for people like me. Older, cautious, not easily impressed, but eager to learn. The app showed a list of active user codes. Daniel's was at the top, labeled family. I clicked the little trash icon and confirmed the deletion. Claire's code, Jenna's code, even the temporary one I once made for the repairman. They were all erased in under a minute. Then I created a new one. 4 digits, a number no one would guess. Not a birthday, not a year, not even something personal. Just 4 random digits generated on the spot. I wrote it in my notebook, the same place I documented the deed, the receipts, the email exchanges. One more page of quiet preparation. Next, I disabled remote access. If they tried to reset it from their phones, it wouldn't work. Only I could make changes now. That part felt important. Power didn't always come with noise. It often came with silence and an ability to control what others didn't even realize you controlled. I moved on to the utilities. I called the local service providers one by one, speaking with calm professionalism. I requested a temporary suspension of water service due to scheduled maintenance. Electricity would stay on for the refrigerator, the alarm system, and anything that protected the property. But Wi-Fi, that was easy. I called the provider and changed the password, a new string of letters and numbers no one could guess unless they were staring at the same sticky note on my kitchen fridge. Then came the final detail, the cleaning service. They had been coming for years, always the same woman, Maria, who knew every inch of the place. I called her directly. I told her not to come this week. She hesitated, said Jenna had confirmed. I told her that effective immediately, no visits were authorized unless arranged through me. Maria was polite. She knew who paid her. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat very still. I was not a vengeful person, but I had spent a lifetime watching others treat my kindness as currency, as something renewable and bottomless. I had given and given, never asking for anything in return except a seat at the table I set. But this time, I hadn't been given a seat. They had taken the whole table and assumed I wouldn't notice it was gone. I thought of that house, the smell of cedar after the rain, the old quilt on the guest bed, the quiet sound of the lake brushing against the dock at night. That place was never just a building to me. It was memory and intention. It was the gift I gave to a family that now treated it like scenery. So I took it back. Not with a confrontation, not with a dramatic announcement, with 4 digits, with a phone call, with a password reset. It was strange how small actions could echo so loudly. By evening, I had done everything. I shut my laptop, made myself a cup of tea, and stepped out onto my back porch. The wind was gentle, brushing against my face like a whisper. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was purposeful. Later that night, I got a text from Daniel. "Hey, did the lock reset or something? We can't get in. Let me know." I didn't respond. 2 hours later, another message. "Power's on, but no water. Is the system acting up?" Again, silence. Then Jenna wrote, "Hi, Susan. Just checking if maybe there was a mix-up. We're at the house, but nothing's working. No Wi-Fi either. Can you call us?" Still. I said nothing, because when people forget the door they walk through is not their own. Sometimes the only way they remember is when it stays closed. They had planned a vacation in a house they didn't own, and now for the first time they were realizing what that meant. I didn't have to make a scene. I just had to change the lock. By the next morning, I had received 4 more texts and 2 missed calls. None of them were answered. I knew they would start to panic soon, not because they were afraid of me, but because they weren't used to being ignored. I had always been the reliable one, the soft landing, the woman who made things easier, and now they were getting the version of me that had been buried under years of polite nods and silent sacrifices. Daniel's next message was clipped and anxious. "We had to get a motel last night. Jenna's upset. Kids are confused. Please let us know what's going on." I read it while pouring my cereal. Somewhere in the background, a local radio station played soft classical music. I sat down and ate slowly, listening to the sound of the spoon tapping against the bowl, the low hum of the refrigerator. Nothing felt urgent because nothing was urgent, not anymore. By midday, I got an email from Jenna. She was trying a different tone, one that sounded reasonable adult curated. She wrote that there must have been a technical issue, that maybe I had changed something by mistake. She asked if I could check just in case. The subject line read, "Quick favor." I deleted it. Meanwhile, they were stuck. I knew the area around the lake house well. I had scouted every grocery store, gas station, and roadside diner within 15 miles. It wasn't a tourist town. There were few hotels, and those that existed were filled with families on summer break, all booked months in advance. If they found anything, it would be small and overpriced, and definitely not close. The lake house sat quietly on its land, locked and still. Their car was probably parked in the gravel drive, the kids cranky in the back seat, Jenna pacing around, looking for cell signal. I imagined Daniel on hold with the Wi-Fi company, trying to convince someone he had authority when all the answers required a name mine. It wasn't that I wanted them to suffer. I wasn't seeking revenge in the classic sense. I simply wanted the truth to settle in. The truth that they had planned a vacation using something that didn't belong to them, assuming they would always have access, assuming I would always be there to make it all work. That evening, I opened the group chat Daniel had created for our family years ago. It used to be filled with cheerful chaos photos of the kids, links to recipes, casual updates on everything from soccer games to school fundraisers. But it had been quiet lately, slowly thinning out like a tree losing leaves one by one. I typed a message and kept it brief. "Hope your vacation is going well. I've temporarily restricted access to the lake house due to unexpected maintenance needs. I'll let you know when it's resolved." Then I put the phone down and made a peach cobbler. I spent the evening reading by the window, listening to the slow turn of pages and the ticking clock on the wall. It felt good, that stillness, like I was finally seated at the head of my own table again. Later that night, I received one more message. This time, it was from Claire, my youngest. She wasn't at the lake house. She lived out west with her own husband and baby, far from the whole mess. She simply wrote, "I saw the messages. Are you okay?" It was the first one that made me pause. I replied, "I'm okay." Just setting a few things straight. She didn't push. She just sent back a single heart emoji. Meanwhile, at the lake, I imagined the panic setting in deeper. No clean clothes, no kitchen to cook in, no Wi-Fi to distract the kids. They would have to spend time with each other face to face without the buffer of curated convenience. That was the part no one plans for, the in-between, the silence, the consequences. Because when you build your life assuming someone else will always carry the load, you forget how heavy it really is until you're holding it yourself. And that, I realized, was the gift I had given them, an unplanned adventure, the kind that doesn't come with sunscreen or matching swimsuits, but the kind that stays with you. The thing about silence is that it has weight. It settles slowly like dust in a forgotten attic, until suddenly you realize you can't breathe. I had spent years learning to live within silence, adapting to it like one might to cold weather or stiff joints, accepting it without question. But they hadn't. They had always relied on my noise, my motion, my presence to keep everything stitched together. Now, for the first time, they felt what it was like when I stepped back. On the third day of their failed vacation, the calls came in faster, more frantic. I didn't answer them. I watched them roll across my phone screen like waves that never reached the shore. Daniel's number, then Jenna's, then Daniel again, then Claire, then back to Jenna. I didn't feel cruel. I felt awake. Around noon, I received a voicemail from Daniel. His voice was tired, not angry, just worn. He said they had driven 2 towns over trying to find a place to stay, that the kids were confused, that Jenna was overwhelmed. He said they were sorry if something had gone wrong, and he asked almost softly if I could call back. He didn't say he missed me. He didn't say he wished I was there, but I could hear it. It was in the hesitation, the way he paused, before ending the message, that subtle falter, that breath caught between pride and recognition. They needed me, not for the keys, or the Wi-Fi password, or the plumbing instructions. They needed me in the way a house needs a foundation, and I wasn't there. I spent the afternoon tending to my garden. I watered the tomatoes, pulled weeds from around the lavender, pruned back the roses that had started to curl under the heat. The sun was high, but the air was kind. Everything smelled like earth and memory. While I worked, I thought about the years I had spent making their lives easier. The birthday cakes that were made without asking, the last-minute babysitting, the emergency grocery runs. I remembered how many vacations I had packed for how many meals I had prepared while they slept in late or took selfies on the deck. They had called it tradition, but really, it had been labor love, yes, but also labor. That evening, just after sunset, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my grandson. He was using Jenna's phone, his name showing in the message preview. It said, "Grandma, why aren't you at the lake with us?" That one hurt, not because I had regrets, but because the one person who hadn't made the choice to exclude me was the one now asking the most honest question. He didn't know what had been decided without me. He didn't understand the politics of adult omission. He just knew that something was missing and that something was me. I stared at the message for a long time. I wanted to respond with truth, but he was too young for that kind of truth. So I sent him a photo. It was one of us from 2 summers ago. He was sitting on my lap, dripping wet from the lake, wrapped in a towel. I had a hot cocoa in one hand and my other arm around him. His cheeks were flushed, his eyes squinting from laughter. I captioned it, "I remember this day very well." "Do you?" He didn't reply, but I saw that he viewed it. That was enough. Later that night, Daniel sent one final message. "We're heading home tomorrow." "I'm sorry, Mom." That was the first time he used the word sorry without wrapping it in excuses. No explanations, no justifications, just the truth of it, bare and quiet. I didn't reply to that either. Not because I didn't accept it, but because it wasn't about what they said anymore. It was about what they had learned in the absence of me. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to stop speaking. Sometimes the only way to be needed is to walk away. And on that day, they finally realized something I had known for years. I wasn't just the woman who made things easier. I was the one who made things possible. They drove home the next day. I didn't have to be told. I could feel it in the stillness. The missed calls stopped. The text messages faded. Even the questions from my grandson fell silent. The tension in the air unraveled, replaced by something even heavier, absence. They had packed their bags, buckled their children into the car, and pulled away from a vacation that had never really begun. The house by the lake stood untouched, still locked, still mine. I imagined the gravel crunching beneath their tires as they left. I imagined Jenna shielding her eyes from the sun as she glanced back, maybe wondering what had just happened. Maybe wondering who exactly she had excluded when she made that decision weeks ago. I pictured Daniel, hands tight on the steering wheel, silently replaying the past few days in his mind, trying to make sense of it, trying to reconcile the memory of me as comfort with the realization of me as consequence. Back home, I washed the sheets in the guest room. I rearranged a few photos in the hallway. I lit a candle in the kitchen that smelled like cedar and orange peel. I wasn't preparing for anyone. I just wanted to feel grounded again in my space, in my choices. Then I printed something, a short letter, 1 page carefully worded. It wasn't an eviction notice. That would have been theatrical. It was simply a formal declaration written with the same precision I had once used in client reports. I outlined that the lake house was private property owned solely by me, and that future use of the home would require direct written permission. I listed the dates of unauthorized access and included a reminder that I retained the right to restrict entry at any time. I attached a copy of the deed for reference. I sealed it in an envelope and mailed it to Daniel's address. No note, no explanation, just the truth on paper and ink with my name printed clearly at the bottom. Because it wasn't just about this trip. It was about years of quiet expectation, years of assuming I would say yes, would show up, would give without asking for anything back. This time, I had said no. Not out loud, not angrily, but firmly. Through action, through withdrawal, through silence so loud, it filled every room they entered without me. A few days later, Claire called. She always waited until things cooled down, until the dust settled. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was fine. She asked if I wanted to talk about what happened. I told her there wasn't much to say. She said they're embarrassed. I said they should be, and then we both went quiet. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was a respectful one. Then she asked something unexpected. Do you still want to go to the lake house in September? Just you and me and Mia? I felt something shift inside me, a loosening, a return. I told her yes. I told her I'd love that. And then I smiled, not because it made up for anything, but because it reminded me that not everything had to be broken. Some things could be rebuilt slowly, gently, honestly. Later that week, Daniel left a box on my front porch, no note, just a return address. Inside were 3 things: a framed photo of us from the first summer at the lake house, a set of keys, and the worn recipe card for my blueberry scones. The one Jenna had borrowed years ago and never returned. I didn't call to say thank you. I didn't send a message. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept spare keys, and placed the ones he'd returned in the very back, not thrown away, but not at the front either. Not everyone who leaves deserves to come back right away. Forgiveness isn't the same as access and love. Real love doesn't live in the convenience of assumptions. It lives in effort and acknowledgement, in asking before taking. They went on a vacation without me, but I went somewhere too, to a place where my value wasn't negotiable. And from that place, not everyone was welcome back. The quiet after the storm is always different from the quiet before it. The first kind is full of aftermath, the second full of ignorance. After everything that happened, the silence in my home wasn't heavy or aching anymore. It was settled firm like soil that's been turned and leveled. I knew where I stood, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to defend it. Owning something is more than a legal fact. It's a relationship, a responsibility, a boundary. That lake house had always meant more to me than just property. It was where I buried grief in the quiet hush of morning water, where I rebuilt joy in the scent of pine needles and fresh-cut lemons, where I remembered how to breathe after losing the man I loved. It was mine because I poured myself into it. Every nail, every floorboard, every sunrise I watched alone before the others woke up. They thought they knew what that house was. They thought it was a vacation. They thought it was tradition. They thought it was a backdrop. But it wasn't. It was me, and they didn't ask if they could take me with them this year. They just decided I wasn't part of the plan. Not this time, not this summer, not until it suited them again. So I made a decision. The lake house was no longer a free-for-all. No more unspoken assumptions. No more unannounced arrivals. No more keys floating around in glove compartments and kitchen drawers like I was just the caretaker instead of the owner. I created a use policy, a document clean, concise. I used the same format I once did for clients at the firm. Headers, bullet points, signature lines at the bottom. I made it clear that the house was private property and access required written approval from me. I included rules about length of stay, number of guests, and the condition in which the property must be left. I stated plainly that failure to follow these terms would result in permanent revocation of access. I printed 3 copies and mailed them with signature required delivery. One to Daniel, one to Claire, and one to myself for record keeping. No emotion, just structure. My property, my rules. I didn't expect applause. I didn't expect outrage either. What I expected and what I received was hesitation. A few days passed with no responses. Then Claire texted, simply received and understood. No anger, no resistance, just acknowledgement. Daniel didn't respond right away. When he did, it was a phone call. I let it go to voicemail. His message was long-winding. He said he understood that he hadn't realized how much he'd taken for granted. He said he hoped I wasn't cutting them off completely and that maybe one day we could talk. Really talk about what had changed, about what they hadn't seen, about what I had never said. I listened to his message 3 times. I didn't call back. Instead, I folded laundry. I took a walk around the block. I made soup and froze half for later. I lived my day uninterrupted by guilt or second-guessing because I had already talked loudly, not with words, but with limits. Sometimes love has to include fences. Sometimes you give people everything and they forget to ask who gave it to them. So you remind them not out of spite, but out of self-respect. That weekend I drove up to the lake house. The drive was peaceful, familiar. The trees arched over the road like they always had, casting soft shadows across the pavement. When I arrived, I walked the perimeter slowly. Everything looked exactly as I left it, except it felt different. It felt mine again. I opened the front door with the new code, stepped inside, and took a deep breath. The air smelled like cedar and thyme. I opened the windows. I stripped the beds. I washed the dishes they'd left behind without thinking I'd ever see them again. I set things back the way I liked them. Then I made myself a drink and sat on the porch with a blanket across my lap, watching the sun begin to dip behind the trees. A breeze passed over the lake. It felt like exhale. The house didn't owe anyone anything, and neither did I. I had spent a lifetime being generous. Now I would spend the rest being intentional. But something unexpected had begun to bloom in that quiet space. I had reclaimed something that didn't feel like consequence. It felt like possibility. His name was Richard. We met at the farmer's market in town, where he was selling honey from his small orchard just outside Asheville. He was kind with weather-worn hands and a voice that made silence feel warm. Our first conversation was about blueberries. Our second was about second chances. It didn't take long before he began visiting the lake house on weekends. We cooked together. We read on the porch. He taught me how to tie fishing knots I'd only ever pretended to understand. It wasn't some wild romance. It was better. It was gentle. 2 people who had lived long enough to know what they wanted, and even longer to know what they didn't. Around the same time, Daniel surprised me. One morning, a delivery truck arrived. A beau sat on the hood of a sleek silver car. A hybrid, quiet and elegant. Inside the envelope, taped to the steering wheel, was a handwritten note. For every mile you gave us, Mom, time to drive for yourself. I cried in the driver's seat, not out of weakness, but because for once, someone had given without expecting me to fold around them. It wasn't about the car. It was about being seen, truly seen. Now I have plans. Richard and I are taking a road trip down the coast in the fall. I'm hosting a weekend for Claire and her daughter in October, just the 2 of them, with muffins and puzzles and stories by the fire. And maybe one day I'll give the house away, but only to someone who remembers the rules. Because this chapter of my life isn't about taking back control. It's about choosing where I place my peace. My name is Susan Miller. I bought this house. I built this peace. And now I'm building the rest of my life with the kind of love that never needs to knock, because it's been invited in.